Eleanor was a little girl, and she'd go to all the different powwows and Indian socials. And she'd sit with her mom and her grandma, and she would watch as the drums started and see the people come out dancing. The men, the warriors, the elders, the women, the children. And sometimes she would even tag along at the end, coming into grand entry. And then she'd hurry back to her mother and her grandmother, and she would watch the dancers. She'd watch the traditional dances. She would watch the warriors dance. She would watch them do the rabbit hop, do different dances. But her favorite dances of all the dances were the fancy girl dances. She loved the way their shawls went out and how they covered their hands and how their feet went up so high in the air. And she told her grandmother, I want to be a fancy dancer. And her mother overheard. Oh, you want to be a fancy dancer? Yes, I want to dance just like those girls. Look how high their feet go. Look how their arms are going. Oh, they're so graceful. They're so beautiful. And look at all the colors. Every shawl is different. And there's long ribbons and strings hanging on the end. Oh, they're gorgeous. And so her mother said, well, I will make you a fancy dance regalia. So her mother made her a pretty skirt. She did some leggings. She made a top that went over the front and the back. And she made a shawl. And she said, do you like this, Eleanor? And Eleanor tried it on. And oh, she said, Gram, how do I look? Don't I look beautiful? I'm going to be a fancy dancer. And her grandmother said, yes, you do look beautiful. Yes, your shawl is lovely. And I like the beadwork on your leggings. It is lovely. And Eleanor looked down and she said, but I still have to wear these old moccasins, and they're kind of bad looking. I want some new moccasins. And her mother said, well, you have your nice new skirt and your leggings, you have your vest, you have your shawl. I think that's enough for now. She said, I even made you hair ties. So she said, go out there and dance. So Eleanor went out and she danced with the fancy dancers. Her legs didn't go up as high, but she watched and learned from them to see what they were doing, and she did pretty well. Well, at the end, all these girls went up and they received a prize. And one received a beautiful hand-carved basket, was all woven beautifully. Somebody else received a necklace, and somebody else received a little pin with beadwork on it. She said to her mother and Grammy, I didn't win anything. And it's because of these old moccasins. And she scuffed her foot. And grandmother said, that's not how to win. You have to practice. Nobody wins when they first go out. So Eleanor started practicing, and she got better and better. But she still never won. And she thought about it, and she said, I know I'd win if I had new moccasins. Look at them. And look over here, there's a little hole right there. And her mother said, well, I can mend that. And she took the moccasin and sewed it back together. And every time there was a powwow, whether it was in Mashpee or whether it was over at Mohegan or whether it was at the Narragansett powwow, Eleanor would get out and dance. And she never once placed. And her grandmother said, Eleanor, you can't dance to win. You have to dance and say prayers for the elders and those that went before you. You must dance because you love to dance, not to win a prize. You must dance to honor all your ancestors that came before you. You must hold your hands out gracefully. You must honor yourself. Honor those that came before you. That's the only way that you will ever be a good dancer. It's not about the prize. Dance because you love it. Look at somebody who you think is a good dancer and learn from them. See how they lift their feet so high, how they honor the drum when they hear the honor beat. Think about how they hold their heads up high and how they smile and how they think of something that is beautiful. Then you might have a chance. Eleanor scuffed her moccasins and said, I still think it's these moccasins. And her mother just looked at her and shook her head. But Eleanor just said, well, I do like to dance. And after that, she started going to the socials, the winter socials, and she would dance because she loved it. And as powwow season came, she started dancing better and better. She didn't care if she didn't win. And finally, it was time for the tribal August meeting, the oldest powwow that's been recorded in all of this great land, the Narragansett powwow. And Eleanor got dressed and her mother braided her braids and put her hair ties in and helped make sure everything was just so. She took her shawl, and even though she had her old moccasins on, she went through grand entry. And then when it was time for all the young women to get out there and dance, Eleanor went out there and she said, who will I think about? Who will I think about? I will think about how happy I am here with all of my people. I am here on this ground that my grandmother and my great-grandmother, even my great-great-grandmother may have danced on. And as she danced, her feet went higher and her shawl just swirled in the wind and her braids just hung down her back and she was so graceful, she was just gliding around. And then it was over. She remembered every honor beat, and she was glowing as she walked back to her grandmother and her mother, and she said, I think I did a good job. And her grandmother and her mother said, you were wonderful. And then, at the end of August meeting, they called all those that had participated out, and Eleanor had won second prize. And she was so happy, she won a little basket that was made to look just like a strawberry. And oh, she loved that basket. She won. She won. And then she said, and I danced because I loved you. And her mother and her grandmother did not say anything. They just told her they were proud of her and to always remember that. Well, a few more weeks went by, and it was going to be the last powwow of the season. And they were going over to the Shinnecock Reservation, across the bay, over the island. And Eleanor was so excited, and she said, I'm going to dance the best I can, but I'm dancing for Grandmother, Grandmother Dove. She always had her cane, and she would use her cane, and then when she heard the drum beat, she would forget that cane, and she would just dance for the ancestors, for all those that went before us. And I'm going to be like her. And when they got to the powwow, and the stands were set up, and the people's tents were set up, it came time for grand entry. And her mother came out and said, Eleanor, I made these for you. And Eleanor looked. There was a brand new pair of moccasins her mother had made. Oh, and she put a little beadwork on it, and they were so nice and soft. And when she picked up her foot and she looked on the bottom of both moccasins, her old moccasins had holes in them, and she had forgotten all about that. And she sat down and she put her new moccasins on and tied them tight. And then she hugged her mother and her grandmother, and she said, thank you. I'm going to dance for you also. And she walked out into the circle, and all the girls stood there. And the master of ceremony said, are you ready? And all the girls nodded. And Eleanor started dancing. And her feet were high up into the air and her legs were straight, her back was straight, and she was smiling and she was swirling her shawl back and forth. And the breeze was coming off the ocean, and she kept dancing and her feet kept going higher and higher and higher, and all the other girls were dancing just as beautifully, and they went up as high as they could, and they danced and they danced, and next thing you know, they were floating up into the air, up above the powwow grounds, and they had turned into butterflies. And now, when you go to any of the socials in the summertime or the good weather in the spring or in the fall, and you see the butterflies around the dance circle, we just know that it's Eleanor and all the other fancy dancers. They have come into womanhood. Thank you.
Support this and other great podcast content at our Patreon page, www.patreon.com/artways. Tamaquag Arts programs are sponsored by Amica Insurance. Auto, home, life, Amica. The Indigenous Artways podcast is funded in part by the Rhode Island State Council of the Arts, Investment in Arts and Culture. Music presented by Eagle and Hawk. www.eagleandhawk.com.